Greetings, Captains, Gunships here. Hope you are doing well. Today is a little bit different. We had a town hall meeting last night in our Discord channel. We went through a number of topics regarding the future of War Thunder Naval. I put all the topics down in the description so you can see what is coming up. Playing a little bit of naval enduring confrontation, but really the town hall meeting and the people talking is what you're going to hear. So without further ado, let's get started. So this is not a me talking all the time. This is just as much, hearing what you got to say. We got myself here and Rowan that occasionally do the odd YouTube video as well, but it's really nice to hear for what everyone has to say, about what, the future of War Thunder Naval could be like and what could happen for the game. I think it's come a long way, I would say that. I think that they have improved it. I've been very happy with the last 3 weekends where we had, for example, enduring confrontation. It's been a long time coming. I don't know if it's a 3-week stint that we never see it again, or whether we're now going to see it on a regular basis. I guess time will tell. I haven't heard anything official about that as of yet. Okay, so let's get started with the first topic, and I posted that in the meeting text, and I shall attempt to read it out reasonably well here. So the topic title here is Relative Balancing of Classes with the Current Battle Rating System. So person here is saying currently there are around 5 main distinguishable classes of vessels in the game. So we've got the PT boats, the frigates, the destroyers, cruisers and battleships. And he says, well, there's a massive jump in capabilities between these, or at least some of the classes, even if they have only maybe 0.3 battle rating apart. Discussion point, what can be done about that? So that's quite a good opener there. So anybody got any input on that one? Get started. Okay, well, if nobody want to go first, I will go first and put forward this. One of the things I think that they should do something about is, especially when you look at the coastal range that we have. I do agree with the split tech trees. I don't have a problem with that as such. But I do think that within that coastal tech tree, there's a massive difference between the ships where they get spawned at. Let's take something like the German M802. Most of you probably seen that premium ship. It is very good, but it's specifically good because it gets a boat spawn compared to being spawned together with destroyers, which would probably make it quite a different things. And it sort of has destroyer-like setup in terms of taking damage, I would say. So what do people think here? Should that kind of ship have a different spawn point, and should there be an in-between spawn point between, I don't know, boats and destroyers?
Yeah, I think stuff like frigates and that, there should be like a in-between spawn of such, because some ships like the K2 just don't really, well, not K2, but like something like a Cone doesn't really fit with destroyers, but also doesn't fit with stuff like, a ferry of sorts. So there should be like an in-between like spawn for those specific ships. That's just my view anyway.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think of the battle rating of the Köln? I think it's 4.3, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you compare that ship compared to, I don't know, the C25, this is a German destroyer. I mean, I think personally the C25 is way more powerful.
Yeah. I mean, that's also like down to just the Cone's guns just don't do that much damage. And there's only 2 of them. They do fire quickly, but they just don't do any damage against destroyers.
I would say that is kind of a problem where you have this overlap between blue water and the coastal water ships. Is that the higher tier coastal water ships just don't really compete too well with the lower tier blue water ships, but also don't compete well with the lower tier, like they overpower the lower tier coastal water ships. So they're kind of stuck in an awkward spot where they can't go up and they can't go down in BR.
should I mean, one way you could combat that, or was potentially to compress the battle rating of the coastal fleet. So if you took, for example, the Köln, which is a 4.3, if that went down to, I don't know, a 3.7, but of course the rest would have to be compressed somehow. Do you think that would work?
I think Coastal already is very compressed when it comes to like just one BR jump. But I don't know really.
I think with something like the Cone as well, even though the guns just aren't effective against destroyers, if it was to be put down to 3.7, the guns that do have are already very effective against like PT boats and that. So
Yeah.
putting it even lower would just make it even worse against PT boats.
Especially because of its damage model.
Yeah.
So if we can't go that way, and we say that we already think that it's too compressed at the bottom of the scale, then really we are looking at pushing ships high up. Now they did do that at one point because they moved battleships up to 6.7, right? They were 6.0s at one point.
Yeah. You should be. I think at the current state, you should be a bit higher, 7.0 to 7.3, roughly for the top battleships, and then compensate with the rest of the ships right in game. Because something like a Helena isn't really comparable to something like a Makuma. Same with like a lot of other ships in different BRs.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I don't know why the battle rating is currently like locked in at 6.7 at the highest. I mean, I can only think it sort of relates to planes, right? And maybe that's how they're doing it, and that's why they don't want to, I don't know, increase the range.
I think it's not only that, but it's also, well, the excuse they've given before is the player numbers. There's just not that many players playing naval. So if they increase the BR, they say that like queue times will be a lot further. That's their excuse anyway. I don't personally believe that's a good enough excuse because there's no reason a Sharnel should be able to verse in Atlanta, like, as one example.
Yeah, and that's probably true to an extent that there is that. It's because I don't see the end of the tree, right? I don't know what an 11.0 ship looks like. I guess that's what I would like to know. I don't know what they have in mind with that, since they keep the battle ratings as they are. You know, what does a 7.0 or 7.3 ship look like? I mean, I can guess at, you know, at 7 or 8.0 we might be looking at the, I don't know, the Yamata or something like that. But then what's the next ones after that? Are we looking at missile destroyers or cruisers and that kind of stuff?
Caviars, maybe. I mean,
Potentially.
it does depend, like what, because we don't really know. That's the thing. Like, we could be stuck at 6.7 for a long time, or next update, Gaijin could add like a 7.0. That's the issue.
Fair enough. So at the moment, if you go back to the original questions, what can be done about it? We don't really have any clear answers to it, apart from maybe there should be a spawn point for frigate type ships. All right. Well, I'll stick the next question in just so we can move on a little bit. So I'll put that in the text chat, and I'll try and put it in bold so it sort of stands out. So next topic is leaked ships. It looks at the future by looking at the bigger ships that have been leaked recently and discussed. And about changes Gaijin is making by adding more modern World War II battleships. Well, I know there is quite a few that is being leaked, and I think Rowan, you sent a whole list over at one point.
Yes,
I think.
I can bring it up again in this text chat.
But people maybe could have a quick nose upon. I must say, personally, I'm not necessarily in a hurry for getting past World War II. I quite like to stay in the World War II era for a little while before we move past that, because I thought that was, in a way, the golden era of sort of battleships and ships in total that are fun to play. I think when we get into the realms of pure missile destroyers and beyond the horizon attacks and that kind of stuff, that could maybe be fun, but it's a very different type of gameplay that would be required.
The thing about these leaked ships, this leak is like already a year old by now. Back then it was quite shocking to see, but by now we're already getting to those ships, most of those ships that we've seen. I think the biggest guns in those leaks were 15 inches.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, what is the most obvious next battleship we are gonna see? Is that gonna be the Fuso, the Hood, maybe the Bismarck? Is that what we're looking at?
I guess Fuso, because I think it could be at 7.0, because it combines sort of IGN Congo and Yuga.
Yeah.
And Germany doesn't really have anything, so we could get Turbid soon. Maybe not next patch, but maybe this year.
I think next update, it wouldn't surprise me if something like Renown was added, because even though it's got 15-inch guns, it's only got 6 of them. So Gaijin might feel like it's an okay ship to start off with at that gun caliber.
Well, and also, as we probably know from, well, the recent thing of the Arizona, just because the ship get big guns, I mean, it really depends on the rate of fire, right? And what kind of shells they put in it to how effective it is.
mm-hmm.
I think for because some of these World War II battleships use like the same guns from like World War One. Obviously, like the same model, but obviously they've been refitted. But the point is, it depends whether Gaijin would add their older shells, because on average, like older shells just have a lot more filler compared to their World War II counterparts. So it depends, like whether Gaijin would feel comfortable with adding such shells, because they did it with Congo. They gave it its sap shell, even though it never had it in 1944. Is that when the ship was? I'm not sure. The point is, it just depends whether Gaijin adds certain shells to ships.
I mean, it's quite often, if you look at, for example, tanks, you know, the battle rating goes up and down a lot depending on what the top ammunition is for the tank that it can use, right? So I think, as we found in naval as well, you know, the shell really matters. You know, if you got the high TNT load of a Shap cell from a Paris Communa or for a Huguet, it makes a significant difference over another sap shell from a different ship, even if the caliber is the same. So yeah, they could do. How quickly they're gonna do it, I don't know. I don't know if they're. I mean, how many here believes that maybe they're gonna put a lid on it and just maybe put out another navy, like for example the French Navy?
Well, the French Navy is kind of overdue at this point, isn't it?
I would say it is. I think that a lot of rumors have been around it, and I think it would be. I mean, I know they scuppered most of them under the Second World War for good reason. They didn't want the Germans to have them, but they did have some really good and interesting ships.
For sure.
I feel like if the French Navy was to be added, it'd be at the end of the year. I don't see them adding it like anytime soon. Possibly into 2023, but possibly the end of 2022. But we haven't really heard anything, so just depends.
I mean, one little sneaky suspicion I have is that maybe it's something that they hold. I mean, we're going to head up for, is it the 10-year anniversary this autumn, right, for Gaijin?
It is, yes, it is this autumn.
Yeah, and so I think that for that, they're probably going to think about pushing out a really big update, sort of significant update.
They did mention that their November update this year was going to be very big as well, like around the ballpark of the last update. In some interview somewhere, I don't remember where.
No. So maybe there was artificially holding it, because there's still only so many days in a month, right? So maybe they are artificially holding a few things back just so they can make that extra beefy. But if we go in turn, so if you start off with America, what would the next battleship be for the America? What is the logical successor to the Arizona?
I'd say another ship of the same class, but of anti-air.
New Mexico.
Virginia, maybe?
Virginia, yeah, maybe. If they could.
I mean, even though it's not related, I would say Alaska, but I mean, we've seen it since like before even battleships came to War Thunder, and it's still not added. So, God knows when something like the Alaska will come.
Okay, so that's America. If we take them sort of in order, so I remember them. If you take the British, which ship do you think would come in there?
Possibly something like a Queen Elizabeth, a Renown, maybe.
Elizabeth seems a bit like a jump to me. The Renown seems a bit more fair. I've also heard something about the Splendid Cats, which are basically the British Congos, so to speak.
I'm not quite sure how big the jump would be up to something like the War Sprite.
Depends. I feel like a World War, like a very early World War One fit for QE would paradoxically be a bit more powerful than it would if it was in World War Two, depending on if it got depending if the World War Two ship got World War One shells, but say they never, then the World War One ships would be best armed.
Mm-hmm.
So depends on how Gaijin do it. They might add like the later ships first. Sounds like whack, but like just to like it's not so. I don't know how to put it. Yeah, I don't know what else going on with that, but yeah.
Fair enough. Okay. So let's move on to Italy, which I think it could do with another battleship. What would be a good next battleship for Italy?
They had a ship class with like bored out 12-inch guns, was it? So they had 320mm guns, something like that. I don't remember what the class was. But they really need another battleship as well.
Yeah, I mean, consider they made the one for the Russians, and then they would get lumbered with them with the one they have at the moment, the Dante at the moment. They could do something a bit better than that. I think the jump up to the Roma might be too big, but
Conte di Cavour is a decent one, I think.
Yeah. I think a Andrea Doria class as well would be an alright pick.
So that was Italy. Fuso for Japan, maybe?
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
since
Other
it's
than that,
in game, or at least as a model.
yeah. Other than that, the Japanese don't actually have a battleship class until we go to 16-inch, but that's a bit of a big jump for now.
That would probably be a massive one, yeah. Germany?
Getting the what is it called again? Der Flinger, that battle cruiser.
Yeah. Is it too early to have something like the Tirpitz, or?
I don't think it's too early for the Tirpitz, but you would have to give other people 15-inch guns pretty quickly after that as well.
Yeah. I mean, it would be a bit stupid adding something like Bismarck when something like Italy still only gets like one battleship. Oh.
Depends, really.
Okay. We've sort of been around that, so I think we'll jump to the next topic. So I'll put that in the chat. I think actually that was the one for you, Rowan.
Sorry. What about, we're talking about the main 4 nations, but what about Sweden? You know, what about China? What about the small nations? Do you think they'll treat them like helicopter tech trees where they only start at tier 5 or tier 6?
Well, I think the first one we should see is France before we see any other, really. That would be.
I totally agree with that. That's way over the time limit.
I mean, there are other ship types and classes, and I'm not quite sure when they would fit in. I'm not enough of buff to know that. I mean, maybe some of it could come in existing tech trees. And we already have, for example, the Orla and the British, and there's others, I think, that has other nation ship that's sort of been put in on the sideline. But I don't know if there's any other nations that could really create a full tech tree. Do you think China could? Never really heard about Chinese battleships.
As far as I know, China used Japanese and Russian destroyers post-war.
Yeah, they didn't really have their own at such, but they could do. I mean, the thing is, China is a big upcoming nation in War Thunder, right? Also, just because of the player base. So that is not impossible that they would do something like that, because they did that with, for example, the tanks. I mean, a lot of the early tanks in China are copy and paste from other nations, so could be. All right. I'm gonna move us on, and I think the next topic, I think that might be you, Rowan, that said that.
Yep.
What do we think we will see after battleships? Well, it's fun to think of what the next battleship we can acquire for our fleet is going to be. I'm curious too what we'll see after they're all done, be it more modern capital ships or the dreaded carriers and submarines. So yeah, interesting discussion points, because that certainly opens the floor for all sorts.
Mm-hmm. It's like you said earlier, I just can't see myself seeing like maybe a modernized Iowa all the way to 11.0. I just can't see that happening. And I'm curious what's going to happen after we're done with all of these battleships. And carriers, submarines, modern ships are stuff people always want to talk about as well.
I mean, they did have submarines as a test at one point.
Yes.
Modern submarines.
Yeah.
That did happen. I think carriers is, I mean, obviously for those of us that have played carriers in World of Warships, we have an idea about how that works. And there you basically get a bunch of sort of AI control, semi-AI control planes you can fly around with and attack ships with and so on. And on one hand, it would be more realistic against the AA of, certainly when we go into the more newer World War II battleships. I think that we can already see it from the Congo, how much AA that one has on it. That maybe, it's more realistic if you have 6 planes attacking and only 2 of them kind of return back, and the rest sort of dies, because that was kind of what happened. But it's a question about the AI control of it, and it's a really, really hard thing to balance.
Yeah.
At least it was and still is in World of Warships, because people get really outraged on either side of the fence, I think.
I feel like I don't think carriers. I feel like missile ships and submarines would come before carriers, because Gaijin have already tested submarines in their April Fool's event, and the fact Gaijin are willing to add guided missile ships. But with aircraft carriers, they'd have to like figure out how to support the service, because you'd be having well over 100 planes in the air at times, depending on the team composition. As if carriers were added with the current system, you could see half the enemy team in carriers, and depends on the carriers, could be something like 5 Essex or 3 Akagis on each team, and you just have such a large amount of aircraft that the savers would probably struggle. So I don't really see them coming anytime soon.
One thing I wondered about this would come on modern day or more modern day ships. Quite often there's a helicopter pad. Would be, and we do have helicopters in the game. I kind of wonder whether we would see helicopters in naval.
And now that you speak of it, USS Pittsburgh already has a helicopter deck on it.
Indeed.
The thing is, what would those helicopters actually do except for being slower float planes? That
I
can't
mean, so a lot of like Cold War helicopters were able to carry torpedoes, especially ones.
and arms and stuff
They
like
went. The problem is that the warheads are a lot smaller than regular torpedoes, so it probably wouldn't do that much damage. So the only advantage I could see a helicopter having over a float plane is that I can land on land a lot easier. Say there's a cap, and there's an island there or a bit of land in the cap, you could land your helicopter on the land and you could just stay there.
Some helicopters did have harpoons and stuff, like anti-surface missiles and stuff that they fired to ships. So I can see that. You could use a scouting mechanic or sonar boys in the water searching for submarines using the helicopter. Because there's sonar as well if submarines do come, and that's another mechanic they need to bring in. That would both obviously then help with depth charges and mines, and then the minesweepers would be able to be brought in then. There's a lot of different mechanics that can be brought in just by bringing a new element into the game.
I mean, it's certainly possible. I think the thing about Warzone has always been that it's very much you as a player have to do an action. And that's where I have the issue with carriers. Could carriers work if you only could spawn one per side? But then how would you ever research an aircraft carrier if only there could be spawned one per side? You could end up in a battle situation where you had 10 aircraft carriers per side, and that would probably not be very funny.
What if they RNG it and give it to someone in the group? And you're able to spawn the carrier at the beginning of the match.
What I was thinking, like the mindset for these planes, is you'd have to think of it as a ship with a very potent secondary armament, like for example Shimakaze, that relies heavily on her torpedoes, but doesn't quite have the main gunfire power. So you treat these planes like you would torpedoes, so you launch them, hope you hit something, whilst you just position yourself, do something with your main guns if you even have any.
So at the moment, if we shoot at someone, Rowan, we point at the ship and we sort of calculate the range and trajectory a little bit in our head, and then we shoot. Where's the skill in sending a plane?
That is a problem, yeah. You could limit the amount of aircraft a single carrier could launch at a given time. It also somehow program in a certain failure chance of aircraft. It's really complicated. It is just really complicated for carriers. That's why, as Halo said before, thinking of submarines and modern ships is a lot easier than it is to think about carriers.
I would say if carriers were to be added, then modern ships would probably be required, because having so many aircraft in the air at once, like most ships wouldn't be able to deal with the amount of planes coming at them. So there'd be need like modern ships that dedicate themselves with like anti-air missiles to shoot down planes at like 10 plus kilometers away. Otherwise, carriers would just be able to just outnumber, like, or overwhelm rather, ships AA and just bomb them with impunity.
One thing we did got to discuss the other day when we played EC, roughly there's a carrier that spawns ever so often, was if that carrier was the AI, but players could spawn in aircrafts on the carrier with no or very little spawn points to be used. And so you maybe limit that to 6 players that could spawn from that aircraft carrier to keep defending it. So you had a constant stream of planes going out from the aircraft carrier, but they were all player controlled, and possibly set up to with some historical accuracy in terms of the lower loadout. That would be a potential way of allowing the aircraft carriers. They wouldn't actually play the aircraft carrier herself, but you would be a pilot on an aircraft carrier.
I think it's going to be its own game mode, not the general, like, with this side versus that side kind of thing. It's going to be like aircraft versus ships, defend the cargo ships while incoming attack from a carrier. That's the way I only imagine it. AI controlled aircraft carrier. One side launches planes, the other side just defend with the ships. That works.
Yeah. I mean, often if you normally have a carrier group, right, you have support ships around it that supports it. And you could say the same with battleships. We have cruisers and destroyers there. But in reality, when it comes to gameplay mode, it's every man for himself. It's not very often that you see, I happen to be in a cruiser and I have good AA. I will sail over and protect a battleship in terms of AA capability. You just don't see that. Every man just go and do their own thing. Unless the game sort of gave you bonuses to protect the ships. I don't think
the game needs
it's
to
going to happen
promote
in
that sort of
reality.
behaviour, in my opinion, for that
Sort
to
of
happen.
spotting mechanic that gives you spotting points, I guess. I don't know.
There would have to be
Gaijin.
something in it for the protective ships. That's what I mean.
Gaijin have already said that they want to make the game fast. 15-minute games where it's fun and it's engaging. I love EC. I love the fact that you can plan the route depending if you use a battleship. Like we said and discussed before, there's a lot more tactics involved in EC than there would be in a normal game. But then you can bring like logistical support. You can do that side of it. If that opens it up more, you can defend a carrier with a battleship group and anti-aircraft cruisers, things like that. So you can give that sort of thought process into EC and make it more enjoyable for the whole group and the opposite team as well.
I'm gonna kind of play devil's advocate on that.
It's like those videos that Fly Daily did about historical battles like the Battle of Britain and things like that. I think that's what everybody wants in the game, but they just don't want to commit to those 2-hour, 3-hour, missions.
Well, I mean, Gaijin has at least shown us over the last 3 weeks that they have given into our demands for enduring confrontation. And I think there's definitely a player base for enduring confrontation. not necessarily the game you want to play all the time, but now and then it's just really nice to go in and do a long battle and say, well, I'm just going to go in and do 2-3 hours, and then I'm kind of done. I think where EC doesn't work well, it doesn't work well in all the boosters Gaijin do and all the dailies you have to do and those kind of things, because you can't really do those in EC, and they haven't really worked that out. So because all their stuff is built around that 10 to 20 minutes game.
That's a simple mechanic fix, though. In terms of make the boosters repeatable. If you spend half an hour in a game, then that's one booster used. If you go 20 minutes into the other game and finish it, that's the second booster used. It's just about the programming side of it, really. It's them
I think that the booster
putting the effort in
for that, as you say, but
game
it's more
modes.
that in order to do your achievements and stuff like that, it's more difficult to do that in naval, I think, in EC.
Yeah, but look at helicopter PVE. How long did it take them to actually come to what they've got? It's nothing. There's no thought process put into that at all, and it's taken nearly over a year for get it developed. They can make so much more money and have a bigger player base if they actually thought of what they're doing in terms of quality of life and gameplay modes than just throwing in vehicles to keep everyone happy. To me, I think quality of life and game improvements more important at this stage than the next shiny toy. I know I'm kind of contradicting myself because I collect everything, but it's getting more apparent now as the years progress that the game has just been the same game mode for nearly 10 years.
I think that's why it's hard for them to change. But I do think the future of the game is in game modes, because at some point you're going to run out of things to put in it, or what you put in it is just really stupid and completely upsets the meta. You end.
Do you think it's going to ruin the realness of the game, so to speak?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you end up with all these experimental tanks and boats and ships that, for probably very good reason, actually never made it in real life, ending up being the meta in the game and the best things in the game, then that kind of takes away from the average.
I understand the reasons for them to use them as fillers. I understand that. I agree with that aspect, but I don't want them to kind of plaster a nation full of prototypes. Just historically, they didn't do so well. Like Russia, for example, not done very well in naval throughout history, yet the number one naval nation in War Thunder, surprisingly.
Right. Yeah, there is an issue that, but then they have a big Russian player base, so that's probably where they get the pressure from, I think. A lot of Russian developers in there, Russian-speaking developers. There's been a little bit of bias in there, even if they say there's no bias. But it also depends what you put out in the game. I think for the battleships, Russia is going to see their days very soon. If we get, clearly the Japanese ships and the British ships and the American ships will take over the show as you start moving closer into World War II, right? Or should do.
Yeah.
Arizona was a massive disappointment, and a lot of people voice their opinion on it, and it's still, they might change it in 6 months or 12 months, but we know what Gaijin's track record's like, and actually working on something.
I'm going to move us on to the next topic, if that's okay. Put that in. I think that's going to be a tough one to try and figure out, if even possible. But how about imposing a limit on the percentage of up tiers per 25 games, and whether that would improve the game without creating a significant issue like overstretching the player base? I guess some people get annoyed with constant up tiers. I think that's a tricky one to answer or deal with, because ultimately, if you don't want up tiers, just play 6.7 all the time, right?
I was just going to say that if you don't want up tiers, beat the top tier. It's always going to be a problem in naval because it's so compressed. There's not enough gap. There's not enough players, and they use the excuse, "Oh, the queue time's going to be longer." I don't care. They need to spread the BRs out and make it more balanced in each of the tiers that they've got. In everything, game modes, every game mode, not just naval.
I think Feta Cheese put it quite nicely. If you aren't up tiered, someone else is. I mean, it's a difficult one to balance out. I mean, if they wanted to make it more equal, then you would lower the BR range from ±1 right to ±0.7 or something like that. But of course, that means people would queue a bit longer for a game, but it would be better. I think if I look back to World of Warships, they used to have, I mean, they had 10 tiers. They used to have ±2, I think. So if you were tier 8 ship, you could get into the tier 10. They changed that a while ago, so it was only 1. So if you're tier 8 ship, you can max get into the tier 9 ship. And I think people stopped complaining after that because they saw, well, yeah, that's as close as it's gonna get. I don't know if that's, that's the only thing I can think of. You go down to 0.7, but you're gonna increase the wait time somewhat. If you had 0.7, then, for example, a 5.7 ship could not be put in together with a 6.7, right? Maximum would then be 6.3, which most people probably argue that, if you put a Prince Oregon against a Sean Horse, that is still plenty of up tier.
Another problem is the black hole BRs. For example, if you were to play 6.0 at the moment is quite saturated with premium cruisers. So if you were to play a 5.3 cruiser nowadays, you'll still see a lot of 6.0. Just because there's so many 6.0 cruisers in the matchmaking queue.
Yeah.
Same when you're in a low BR destroyer, you'll tend to face a lot of 5.0 matches because a lot of people are using 5.0 premium ships such as the Moffat.
I mean, there's some ships that you see an awful lot more. I will put the next topic up because it kind of links into what we are talking about here. So the next one is about bots in naval. Basically saying bots in naval have recently become widespread, sometimes over 50% of a match being bots, all using the same ship. How would Gaijin or anyone for that matter be able to solve the issue without just a quick bandit fix that does more harm than good? So I created a video a little while ago called, zombie ships or something like that, because basically you spawn into a match and you could very well see 6-7 Helenas on the one side, and they're all doing the same thing, sailing slowly forward and just shooting left, right, and center using the AI, and like there's nobody home.
The easiest way for them to resolve the question is just ban the people who get reported. But I think, I've never actually double checked it myself, but I think a while ago, apparently they don't take those reports too seriously because it apparently insults the player. Because these are legitimate player accounts that are just running a bot program or doing some AFKing. But it's, yeah.
That's the issue as well. Sometimes you can have players in a Helena or in a Moffat that just are that bad at the game. But sometimes you just wouldn't be able to tell because they play that badly. So you couldn't just have it so if their stats was such and such low, ban them, because sometimes you could actually have a player who's not that good get banned accidentally purely because they're just not that good at the game.
Maybe. I mean, I think that you ought to be able to detect things like that, but I also think that if you made an algorithm for detecting that it was a bot, they would just change the bot slightly, making it turn left and right a little bit now and then, or whatever, something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but an arms race is better than just letting them go loose without any kind of real action being taken against them. Though
I mean,
it would take
the
a lot
worst thing
more
is
resources.
it pays to play that way. Maybe that's the fundamental thing. Maybe it cost only 2,500 silver lions or something like that to repair
Up the repair
right?
cost. Yeah.
I mean, maybe that should increase, and maybe unless they do more significant damage, the RP should be a lot less than it is.
I feel like a lot of these plays, like I've been looking because I play arcades, so a lot of the bots I've been seeing, they basically play like very little naval, but have a lot of matches in air or ground. So it's possible that they're just using bots purely to just grind SL so they can afford stuff for their tanks and planes and such, purely because they don't want to play naval.
Yeah, it could well be that I did think about that the other day, whether it's just like a mode for that, or whether it's some kind of, I was going to say, RP booster service. I want to have the American naval tree, but I'm not prepared to actually play for it. So I just get some fella to sit and spawn in my Helena about 1,000 times, and voila, I have researched the American tech tree.
The weird thing about these bots is that they started to appear around when, for a brief period of time, the AI gunners were actually accurate with the primary guns. That's when they started to appear. They fixed that problem, so the AI gunners were no longer accurate with the main guns. But the bots just kept on increasing in number.
Yeah. I mean, it must pay to play it that way. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there, right?
Of course.
So how do we counteract it? That's the whole issue, isn't it?
I think it comes down to the repair cost. Like, you just look at the Moffat or the Helena, the repair cost is only like, what, 700 credits or 2,000 credits compared to, like, 30, 20. The economy is just so cheap.
Yeah. Because you've got stuff like all these premium ships have like such high modifiers and such little repair cost compared to like tech tree ships, which like I think and you got Helena with 2,000 SL repair cost, but then like a Brooklyn would have like over 15,000 and much lower modifiers. So like,
Well, I think
Probably.
if you look at the Helena, I mean, that's 2,500. If you look at the Brooklyn, this is probably the closest you can get. I think that's 27,000, but I'm not quite sure. I think that was the last time I looked at it. So there's a massive, massive difference between the two.
I'll double check the repairs.
Plus, the other problem is, I mean, there's only, it's just the saturation and the premium. It's just Helena. There's no other 6.0.
You do see bots in Zheleznikovs and Mikumas as well, but very less so than Helena.
I'm shocked it isn't.
I guess my point is just for the American tree. Yeah, but yeah, other trees, it's just like one or two ships in the 6.0, I think.
I think for me, the truly shocking thing is just not seeing that many bots in like the German tech tree. I thought there'd be more popular, but I don't even think I've seen like a bot Eugen. I've seen a bot like Belfast, but I haven't seen like a bot.
You see the bots more in Karlsruhe than you see in Eugens, for some reason.
That's a weird. A weird one though. I mean, the cone is the Karlsruhe is a lot cheaper than the Eugen, isn't it? So that could be why.
Okay. I'll get on to another topic. I'll just take some of it out that was because we already talked about it. This person has written quite a few different things. Put that in chat. So this person suggests open water maps need to be removed, and single cap game modes either needs to be removed or reworked. I don't know why, but it's clearly that person doesn't like them very much. I don't personally dislike the open water maps. I kind of feel that in naval that we weird if we didn't have them. But maybe something else could be done to make them maybe a little bit more interesting.
I quite like the open ocean maps as well, but there should only be one, so that if people really don't like it and want it banned, can just ban it.
Yeah, personally, I do not like them, especially since I play arcade. Like every match, it's just a torpedo fest with a Shimakaze in the back, launching torpedoes every minute. Like, and it doesn't help. There's like 5 of them, so you could very well play like 5 times in a row on an open water map, and it's just a torpedo fest. Like, there's no really counterplay to it other than just constantly dodge, but just no skill in it. Personally, I kind of agree with him. Either that or just have one map.
Yeah, I think that just having the one map would be sufficient. So people could potentially ban that. I think actually for the open water bit, because I mean, I'd be quite happy for EC just to replace that bit, because there's a lot of open water in EC, although there's also some islands to fight about, but you certainly have plenty of open water in that respect. So, that's a good one for feta cheese. I think put that in there. Can we please, for the love of God, reduce tickets bleed for caps? I would put it in a different way. I kind of think that sometimes the speed of capturing a capture point should be based on the number of either crew or weight of ships, i.e., a battleship should capture a point a lot faster than a small PT boat.
I feel like crew would be best, since like if it was just displacement, then it'd be battleships doing the best against caps, but not many battleships will ever even get near a cap. So I feel like
You'd
it
be
will.
surprised how many times I've captained a battleship. There's no
I
other
mean,
person bloody
I'm
would.
not saying it's impossible, but I mean, more than likely it will be like cruisers that will try, or destroyers.
What will that do to scout planes, though? Because the main purpose of them is capping points to most people.
Yeah, but that was kind of just a mechanic that Gaijin put in, right? Is that the right way of going around it?
Yeah, that's also something to think about, because I think certain scout planes are a lot better in other uses besides just capping points to most people, or can be.
Let's go up to another one. That's quite a good one here that we can talk about. And that is make some kind of change to the new aiming mode. And he says not to make it shit. My only personal pet hate with the new aiming mode system is at short range. And sometimes if a ship comes directly towards you, it doesn't seem to deal with the lead indicator very well.
The major issue I have with the new aiming system is just the range to target being on like a different layer from your crosshair. So sometimes your own HUD can overlap with the range to target, and it's really annoying to try and get a clear picture of it.
I also find of lately that when you try to adjust your range according to the range you want to shoot at, it fluctuates quite a lot or jump up and down, which I find quite annoying. And I was wondering whether it'd be possible to, if you locked in place the distance to the ship, so the distance to the ship might change because your range finder will change that. But rather than you, how should I say, if you're targeting a ship at 10 kilometers away, for example, and I said that I will shoot at 9.8 kilometers, I would rather have a system where I could say, I'm going to change the target the ship and I'm going to go minus 200, and it's going to stay at minus 200 until I change it to minus 150, for example.
Mm. Yeah, have your have the range of your guns be relative to the distance to the target, rather than have it be relative to wherever you're locked onto the target.
Yes. I don't know if that would make it too simplistic to use, but my intention is that I want to do this. So how difficult should the game need to make that for me? That's probably where it comes from. But I think if I just had that relative thing, that would make it a lot simpler for me to target and keep at that target while I was shooting and dealing with fires and goodness knows what else.
Of course, you do have to take into account when your shooting becomes easier, the enemy shooting becomes easier as well. So when you dish out more damage, you'll also be taking a lot more accurate shell fire.
That's true. That's true. So we're relying at the moment on the fact that I'm better at using the scroll wheel than my counterpart.
That is usually how the gunnery goes, yes.
Fair enough.
What about the aiming system in arcade? Do you think it could ever be repurposed or anything like that? Because I know the aiming system in our naval arcade is a bit different.
Yeah, and I mainly play arcades. It's mainly just move your cursor or your control pad, just move it below the lead indicator, and that's all you gotta do. That's it. It's really simplistic. I haven't got a problem with it personally, although I wouldn't mind it per se if it was updated to what you said before, where it was just you keep it minus 200 away constantly, and then only change it when you want to change it, sort of thing.
Fair enough. I'm going to grab us another topic because I'm concerned a little bit about time. Oops. Hold this. So the topic is historical accurate shells of all varieties for all ships alike. So there is no bias. It kind of suggests that the shells that we have on the current ships are not correct. How much truth is there in that?
I think there's some American cruisers that have VT now, but really shouldn't have because of their year of refit.
Right.
Then, of course, there's the Congo with that subshell, even though she kind of should and shouldn't have it.
I feel like if the gun is the same, if it's the same type of gun, it should keep old and new shells. It should keep its old shells, but if it's newer, so say you've got a let's just take a Revenge class as an example. If it was in a 1940s fit, it should be able to keep its World War II shells and World War I shells, because if we go with purely historical, then we gotta wonder what happens when you add a paper ship of sorts, or not a paper ship, but a ship that wasn't completed. Because you've got something like I can't remember what it's called, but you got the Russian battleship that was being built, but was never was with like 16-inch guns, and the sap shell on it was comparable to like some AP shells, but it had like 130 kilograms of TNT equivalent. So you'd have to draw the line on how you'd want, like, how historical you'd want shells to be.
Well, I mean, that's up for the game developers to sort of come up with, but I would think there's enough ships in the world that we don't really need paper ships. I think it's perfectly okay for the game that Russia stopped with battleships where they are now and first gets, maybe at a later level goes over to missile cruisers or destroyers or whatever together with all the other nations. Israel, for example, doesn't have any tanks below on a battle rating 5.0 because they didn't exist before that time. So I think that it's okay for nations, even bigger nations, to have gaps, because if they just didn't have the equipment, I don't think we artificially just should put things in there. I mean, one thing would, for example, be if you look at Honor, let's look at the mouse, the tank, at least that was produced, at least one or two examples of, but to put a mouse in the game just because they made the tracks, I don't think would have been fair. I think the same, I mean, that's a personal opinion, of course, but I don't think just because a battleship had the keel laid down, but it was never actually completed or built, that it should just be put in game. I mean, if they do it, I will probably play it, of course I would, but I think that you leave too much to what they think would work on paper rather than sort of actual battle proven. Got to a topic which I don't know particularly much about, so I won't speak too much about that. Maybe some of you have an idea. This is topic of naming of ships. Person here is quite honestly fed up with how certain ships are named. Some are plain wrong. Entire Japanese fleet uses prefixes that they do not have. US classes, etc. Some not spelled correctly, etc. Historically, is that a big issue? Do people care?
There are some people that really care about it, and there are some name mods out there from War Thunder Naval you can just download. But it's difficult to keep them up to date with every single update. But yeah, where, for example, as it states in the topic as well, apparently Japan never called their own ships by IGN and then name. They just called it the name of the ship.
Yeah.
There's similar things for ground vehicles and air vehicles as well. People, it's more of a personal preference, really, for as far as I know. But it is kind of a nice touch having all of the proper real names for it.
I mean, I think possibly certain things also get a little bit lost in translation sometimes, or about to. So I think it's a tricky one to get right, but maybe it's something that should spend a bit more time getting right, just like anything else.
I have a feeling maybe it's just me, or does Gaijin have any special numerals in any other vehicles that isn't naval? Because maybe that might be like a coding issue or something else that may be an issue. Because I think everything else is only in normal letters, I guess you could say, or something else with like the Udachi issue.
For the accent above the letter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we have that anywhere.
I'm thinking it may be because also like how usernames don't allow accents. Maybe it's a War Thunder issue that's causing it,
Probably.
or something else.
Maybe not the easiest problem to solve, but maybe a little nudge to Gaijin now and then they would maybe get on board. Okay, the next one is sort of interesting on many levels because the topic is, what are some of the biggest hurdles that prevent the larger player base, or at least the vocal majority, from taking a positive interest in naval? What could be done about it?
I think the biggest reason for that was its launch. It launching with only coastal, and its rather painful early economy, early research, and early SL gains.
I think it was tough in the start. There was like they launched it and it was really hard to get anywhere. I think a lot of people, you're right, tried it out, and so did I, and probably lost interest in it. It has been a lot better since, but it has to be a lot better for a long time to get those people that thought, no, I'm never going to go there again, to actually invest time in it.
It doesn't help as well that a lot of the bigger content creators constantly say that naval is bad, which, I mean, they're not wrong, but it doesn't convey a good message to a large part of their audience, especially if they haven't played it like recently. So they could be given an opinion on the game mode, which can get translated to a large portion of people who will never try it out because their favorite content creators have said it's bad.
There's that. I mean, I've seen of lately, like a few have sort of dipped their toes into it. I think Phil Daly I think he's one of the biggest, right? He put a video out not so long ago, and there's one or two others that occasionally will do a bit of naval in there, but the majority, the bread and butter is clearly tanks and planes, right?
Mm-hmm. It's also just the like naval. You'd think on first impression it would play similarly to ground, but it really doesn't at all. There's a lot more. There's a lot different ways about positioning, about how to engage with enemy targets. All that kind of stuff is very different from ground-based battles, which might off-put some people at the start.
Yeah, indeed.
I will also say, like, low-tier fighting for most people can also be very boring for naval. Like, the 3.3 range for reserve, in my opinion, is very boring to play for destroyers or anything of the sort.
I think also it's quite hard for a new player to go in and play naval without feel either overwhelmed or feel that they're being destroyed really quickly.
Yeah, because in naval, unlike the other two game modes, you're constantly under fire. Like in aircraft, you shouldn't be taking any damage unless you're, well, badly positioned, and same for tanks. But in naval, you're going to be constantly getting shot at.
There's that.
I think you last longer in naval than any other mode when you're a beginner. Because you got 3 lives, takes a while to die, instead of a one-shot kill like you do in tanks and planes. You don't even have time to learn anything in those modes. And why is it unpopular? Because people want it to be more arcadey, I suppose. I don't want them to change it, be more arcadey.
A lot of people want it to be more like World of Warships, with this intermingling of classes, but that just doesn't work.
If they do that, it'll drive me away.
Yeah. I will say they do it a little bit better on arcade for, like, if people want a more arcade experience. Naval Arcade works very well in the fact that it gives you the same amount of RP as Naval Realistic, but less Silver Lions.
Yeah.
But it's a different experience.
I would say, I mean, the only gripes I have with arcade is like in a like bomb reloading and torp reloading. Other than that, I prefer arcade to realistic. But it's just those two factors that like severely put it down quite a bit. because you can get, because I've been in games where you just have an aircraft sit 5 kilometers, and just drop bombs without ever being shot down.
Yeah, I will say like Naval Arcade is definitely good for people to get into if they want the more just simple version. But it also has issues like you said with people just spamming torps or bomb spamming, which is the meta in Naval Arcade essentially.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna move us on. We got 2 topics left, and then we are sort of done. So
Is anyone planning to do EC after this?
Yeah, but we're going to discuss EC before we are doing it. I might do. So the next topic is would modern vessels, an ASHMS, I don't know what that is. I assume it's some kind of missile system.
Anti-ship missiles.
Yeah, really work in the current naval game environment, and would it really generate meaningful amounts of interest in naval? A lot of people, mostly people who have never seriously played naval, say that modern vessels and ASHMS system would make them more interested in naval. What do the actual naval players think about this?
I've heard mixed things about anti-ship missiles. Like, apparently, their armor penetration capability is not the greatest. Yeah, but of course the problem is how do you... They're beyond visual range usually, anti-ship missiles, and the person on the receiving end can't do anything about it currently.
I think 2 ways that would make anti-ship missiles a lot more like bounced in game is to have high HEVT shells detonate near them, and have where in game currently you have AI gunners that can shoot ships and aircraft. You could have it that gunners can also shoot missiles as well to try and like. So if you've got like a group of like 5 ships, they could stop like missiles if they all had like all their gunners set on like targets and missiles, sort of thing.
Well, you could have a Sea Whiz.
Yeah, I was going to say you have things like Sea Whizzes and stuff like that. So you have anti-missile defense systems on ship, but you of course.
I mean, the 12.412 already has that. It just doesn't work.
Mm.
I will say for the other point of people who are interested, like not interested in naval right now, but they'll be interested with anti-ship missiles. I think most people are interested if they get interested with modern because it's a lot easier to play. All you have to do is just basically point and click with anti-ship missiles and start setting them at each other. Compared to the aiming mode right now, where you have to think, it's a lot less of. Would it be less skill? I don't know what to really say with anti-ship missiles being added in.
Well, with something like, depending on the ship, say you've got like an early Cold War ship, say like a Albany class cruiser, like they'd have like no armor basically, and they'd be covered in a lot of like radars and such. So what you could do is, as like a bounce, is if they've got a missile targeted on a ship, if their targets and radars are knocked out, that their missiles just become dead, that they just no longer work.
It also depends if you put if these are like new ships, or you put new ships, destroyers, cruisers, modern destroyers and cruisers, or if you give these anti-ship missiles to the ships that already have them in game, like the Albatross, like the PGO-2, the Sparviero. Those are ships that are supposed to have anti-ship missiles but don't have any in game at the moment.
I mean, if they gave a ship the Harpoon, it would be some 5 times more powerful than the current Nettuno missile on the Saeta, which is quite a bit more explosive power, but it still wouldn't do much against an armored warship. So I think these wouldn't
That's
break
nice.
the game if they were in coastal.
Mhm.
Quick question: how would helicopters or aircraft with anti-ship missiles do exactly as well?
Same thing, really. It's more like what target does this anti-ship missile have? If it has any kind of significant armor, 125 kilos of TNT, well, it'll do something, but not that much.
It'd be the same as dropping an aircraft bomb with that amount of explosive. Because they don't really pen these missiles.
What about better torpedoes in the Cold War era? Would work.
Which ones?
Like
Well, the
kilo
Mark
weight?
48 would work pretty well, but it's still designed to go against modern ships that don't have armor, so they don't have torpedo blisters and
Yeah, what's the explosive for of these torps? These modern
Mark
torpedoes.
48. It's a lot.
A lot of modern torpedoes are designed to go under ships and break their keels in half, rather than like hit the ship itself.
Hmm.
But I don't think they're
Because
designed to go under a battleship.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
The warhead weight is 450 kilograms.
That is
Mark
hard.
48, and it's probably something very high explosive.
No, it's
One-
if it's a high, still, I think like the current Japanese 998 kilo of TNT on one of their long lances is more than we'll have on those modern
Yeah.
torpedoes.
I think
Probably.
the one last thing to add in about Cold War is the nuclear capability of those ships will start increasing a lot. And I don't know how Gaijin's going to do if they ever want to do anything nuclear, like
Yeah,
nuclear.
Technically
Submarines.
speaking, if you could get a Cold War refit of one of the Iowa classes and give it its nuclear shell, that would be something.
Yeah.
what
That would
like
be a game ender.
you get like 20 kills in a row, and you can use the nuke shell to end the match of sorts, like how it is in ground and that.
Who knows?
I think we should move on.
All I know is that this thing, we already have it in coastal. It doesn't break the game in coastal. So if they do it to coastal, I think it's fine. If they start having issues with, blue water and everything just turning into fire and forget, then it's going to drive me away from the game because there won't be any tactics or strategy anymore.
Yes, we'll see what they do.
A lot of early Cold War ships with anti-ship missiles or like dual-purpose missiles are beam riding, so you could make it so a player has to manually aim the missile.
Like the Cetas Natuna then.
Yeah, like that, instead of just firing a missile and then doing something else entirely. Like you'd have to keep an eye on it. And again, if you, like I said earlier, if you had it so if your main targeting radar was hit, like your missile would, if you didn't repair your radar, the missile would just keep going in that line and just wouldn't hit your target.
Fair enough. Okay, I'll move us on to the last question. It's kind of topical because it's about enduring confrontation that we are enjoying a bit of at the moment. So the topic is what fixes stroke improvements to naval enduring confrontation could be made to make it better. I think for this we'll just try and focus on the RB mode, just to that we all speak the same language basically.
I'd like to see a limit to the number of spawns that you can do in one spot, or maybe just have a 1-minute timer before you can fire your torpedoes, just something like that. So it doesn't just become silly. Somebody spawning 50 times in a row and spamming torps is kind of breaks the feeling of the game.
I've seen it as well in our BEC, is where somebody would spawn at a convoy spawn in a coastal vessel, fire all of its torpedoes J out, and just do that over and over and over again.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
kind of breaks
I've
the
seen that
game
as
for
well.
me. I'd like to see something to change that.
I think the
I
time
would-
to respawn is probably fairly crucial, especially when you are defending or trying to take a port. The fact that the person dies and can instantly spawn
Oh, yeah.
again is a bit of an issue.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
cooldown timer for spawning at the same place twice might be interesting.
Or
Yeah,
maybe
I
just
think-
a torpedo timer. So you
Something-
I don't
can
think-
defend it, but you can't suddenly spam out torps.
I don't
something
think you should be able to spawn instantly if you die, because then you can just keep spawning over and over and over, and it just delays like your port getting captured. It just
So-
drags the match on.
Or maybe
It's
have deaths cost more
Yeah.
to the team. You know, like if you die 40 times, your team loses.
Something I did notice a lot as well is like some naval EC maps are really well designed and have some really good objectives that you can do in a ship, and then some of them feel empty, and you would take ages to reach in a single objective that would give you almost diddly squat in rewards. It would feel like half the time.
It's
Is,
not all actions that yields the same reward. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Some of the maps are a little asymmetrical too, like depending on which side you get. You could be on the very fortunate end of the asymmetry, you know?
Hmm.
And the biggest thing I want is remove less air-dependent objectives in certain maps, because I notice that happens once in a while where a certain map has objectives that can only really easily be done by aircraft when it's naval EC. Is a bit of an oddity, in my opinion.
Fair enough. Okay. Yeah, I think that for EC, I would like some of the fixes to be in place for. We found at the moment the reload bug. I don't know if, how many of you have had that, where you spawn a battleship and then your reload goes down, but then you spawn again in another battleship and find that you still have the same massive reload time as you had in the first one. So that's certainly a fix. I would agree with some kind of delay for respawn, just to make that a little bit more nice.
I'd like to see a limit placed on the amount of time the game kind of elapsed before they throw you into it, like maybe no more than 10 minutes. It's just very frustrating to get into a game that's almost an hour old and everybody's in battleships and you've got no spawn points up.
That too. Just out of interest, which are your favorite map in EC? Which one do you like the best? Or is it one that you particularly dislike? I guess that's the other question.
I'd say Malta is my favourite. I mean, I don't really play that much EC, but I haven't really got any issues with that map. So I'd say that would be my favourite of sorts.
I haven't really
Stephen,
played
there's an
enough.
interesting comment in the chat to say increase more rewards the longer you play. Might be a fair point. I'm not sure how achievable that is, but
Something they could do as well to someone said something about AirSim, how they fix some of their issues, is to get rid of people constantly respawning and doing something. Is if you get a kill with a torpedo or something else and you J out or respawn, the rewards are heavily reduced or like halved. Like in how in AirSim people would bomb a base and then J out, so then they wouldn't have to go and land again and then bomb a base again. They could do something like that.
I'm not sure people care because I've seen guys do it with a Shimakaze where the spawn cost is like 20,000 and they spawn 40 of them in a row and die. They don't care. They probably just lost 2 or 3 million SL on the game. They don't even care. They just die 40 times in a row.
Yeah, timers on spawning would also fix that, but yeah. Well, and I feel like the main issue with some people spawning a lot and doing that is like how easy it is to farm SL and naval as well right now with the zombie issue, which goes back to that thing.
okay. Right, gentlemen, that is the end of the topic. So first, thank you very much to everyone that submitted some topics, so we had something to talk about. It was a bit of an experiment from my side to hold this little town hall meeting just to talk about War Thunder. But we had a fair few people turn up and listen and write comments in the chat as well, which I think is really cool. So, thank you everyone for popping in, and I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe we'll do something again, not soon, but maybe in a year's time. It would be good to have another one and to see where we are then, and see what actually happened as a result of where we are there with the naval as a whole. So really appreciate it, everyone to pop in and say your bits. So that's great.
Sound.
Thank you, Gunship.
It was
You're
a
most welcome.
pleasant conversation.
Yeah, it was fairly respectful. People weren't really talking over each other. It's very calm.
And let's see where we are next year.
Yeah, sure thing. We'll figure something else out. All right, gents, I'm going to have a little break, and then I'll probably think about playing a little bit of Naval for a change.
Yep.
I need to finish my video. Yeah. Right then, in a bit.